Good morning. Happy holidays to all. My name is Jason Rigoni. I serve as the Executive Director for the Westmoreland County Industrial Development Corporation. On behalf of my colleagues, Dr. Tuesday Stanley and Jim Smith from the Economic Growth Connection and Dan DeBone from the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce, we welcome all of you here to Westmoreland County and to the RIDC Westmoreland site. We certainly thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to visit us here in Westmoreland County. And for those that are online, we certainly also thank you for participating today. I think that our numbers are we have more people in attendance personally than online, which is showing a significant advancement in the pandemic. And so again, we really do appreciate your attendance today to hopefully be able to, as we all listen in and hopefully learn something about the significant opportunity in front of us with autonomous vehicles, the technology associated with a platform and its impact across multiple regions or multiple industries, and hopefully our regional supply chain. I'd also like to thank the Allegheny Conference on Community Development and its affiliates for supporting these types of events. Last month, as a region, we submitted a large grant application to the Economic Development Administration for their Build Back Better Regional Challenge grant. The application is to secure vital funding that would position southwestern Pennsylvania and potentially catapult our region forward with the integration of technology, the development of a skilled workforce, and the investment hopefully into sites and facilities across the region to support this growing industry. I'd also like to thank Don Smith and his team at the RIDC for hosting us here at this facility. I think it's very appropriate that this site, as we all know, once housed the manufacturing of vehicles through Volkswagen, and now we are developing technology with our friends at Argo AI for autonomous vehicles. So we've made that transition. I'd also like to thank Don and his team at this site for the transformation that has taken place to a modern, multi-tenant facility that houses companies across multiple industries. Companies like Siemens Energy, Senveo, DNP, workforce training opportunities through the community college, Argo AI. We had a great announcement about a month and a half ago with Intervala investing significant capital into this site. And probably my favorite tenant being City Brewing. I apologize, Brian, but when autonomous vehicles can make beer and drive people around, you'll move into that #1 spot. I'd also be remiss as a county economic development individual if I didn't promote Westmoreland County. For those that are online or in attendance, we certainly have facilities and sites and a workforce that can support your business expansion. So certainly would love to have a conversation with you to support that potential growth. Again, I thank you all for coming today. We certainly look forward to the conversation that we're going to learn a little bit more about autonomous vehicle technology and the multiple platforms that it can support. And I guess at this point, I am to turn it over to Matt Smith, President of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, as well as Brian Selensky from Argo AI, Chairman as well of the Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce. Matt.
I'm Brian Selensky, CEO at Argo AI. We want to make getting around cities safer, more enjoyable, and easier for everybody. This technology has a real possibility of eliminating someday road crashes, which I think is a big deal. You know, Pittsburgh has some of the brightest minds across so many different industries, whether it be robotics, artificial intelligence, science, medicine. It's a great place, there's a lot of talent here. I can't think of a better place to be tackling some of the world's hardest problems.
You didn't need me live, you just play the video.
Well, as you can tell, this is going to be a very informal discussion. As Jason said, I'm Matt Smith, President of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce. Really happy to be here with Brian Selesky, not only our chair, but founder and CEO of Argo AI. We're going to start out with a brief discussion, but first I want to thank Westmoreland County for hosting us, Jason and his team for hosting us, Don Smith and RIDC for hosting us out here in Westmoreland. It's really a tremendous, they're a tremendous partner. We always look forward to collaborating with them, and Westmoreland County is an absolutely critical part of our region's future. I also want to thank all of our regional investors for being with us today, not only in person, but with us online, and particularly want to thank our sponsors for today's event, Giant Eagle, PNC, Gateway Health Plan, Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, Peoples and Essential Utilities Company, PPG, and UPMC Health Plan. Without their support, we would not be able to put on events like this. And so today's event is really going to be focused on the Forefront Report, and we have a great panel for everyone a little bit later. And to me, the overall theme is to really have a discussion and to figure out how we can build upon the really tremendous foundation that we have in southwestern Pennsylvania in the autonomous mobile systems sector. We like to say, as part of this study, and I should thank Don Smith for partnering with us on the study, as well as RK Mellon for funding this study. We like to say when we're talking about the study that we have a wonderful foundation here in southwestern Pennsylvania. We have tremendous advantages, but our position is not unassailable. And we really need to make the smart public policy decisions and the smart investments and robust investments to take advantage of this sector. So very happy to begin the event with a conversation with our chair, Brian Selesky. And I just want to start out with a little bit of a 30,000-foot level. Tell us about the current state of the AV industry globally. Where do you see it right now? Where do you see it going? Near term, maybe even medium term and long term. And what's your vision there?
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Matt, for also agreeing to host this. And a huge shout out to Don Smith, RIDC, and also Pat Stefano. Really appreciate your support here in the county, but also in the state of Pennsylvania. We're trying to get autonomous vehicle legislation passed here in the state, which is really, really important, and will be a big signal that PA is ready to be really the capital of autonomy, and Pittsburgh ready to be capital of autonomy. So we're hoping that gets pushed through, and just thank you to all of you for your regional support in making that happen. So where are we in terms of autonomous vehicles? I think the report that really does summarize it really well. This is a $1 trillion industry. The U.S. is presently in the lead, but there are a number of things we're going to have to do in order to stay in that lead position. At Argo, we have about 1,600 employees. We are testing across 8 different cities, hundreds of vehicles in our fleet coming online, and we are within really the next 2 years moving from a development phase to a new phase of maturation where we'll be deploying this technology across cities in the U.S. as well as in the years to come in Europe. The opportunity in front of us is enormous, right? So the benefits, autonomy is really an enabler, and the benefits that are unlocked through autonomy are enormous. First and foremost, there's safety. Over 40,000 people in the U.S. alone die each year due to traffic fatalities. We have 1 million worldwide. That number needs to come down. And if we look at, very broadly, if we look at vehicle surface transportation, you can see over the years certain standards and technologies coming online in the vehicles we use today that have meaningfully reduced the number of fatalities and also the number of crashes and injuries. But there aren't that many. So if we go all the way back to the Safety Act of 1966, that started to talk about, hey, when we make these vehicles, we should think about the occupants and protect them. And so we call that crashworthiness in the industry. Let's build these vehicles in a different way to make sure that we protect occupants if there is a crash. Then we moved on to seatbelts. That was in the 80s, if you remember the big push. In the 90s, it was airbags, right? And airbags was a very new technology and actually came under fire in the early days because the industry was really working out a number of issues to make sure that it was deployed only in the right scenarios and so on. But there was good public-private partnership that made sure that the airbags, which are now an essential utility, and we put more and more of them in the cars every year, come online, right? From there was electronic stability control. That's the list. Those are the meaningful inflection points that have addressed up to this point. What is the next big inflection point? It's autonomy. Drivers are increasingly distracted. Traffic is increasingly congested, and we have road and surface infrastructure that is getting more and more complex and harder to drive. A computer never gets distracted, can see all around the vehicle 360 degrees out to hundreds of meters, and is able to track thousands of things at a time and predict their movements. You can't say the same thing about your teenage driver. You can't say the same thing about some drivers that shouldn't be on the road, right? You can't say the same thing about drivers who have their cell phone out. So this is the way of the future in terms of safety, but it goes also so much further beyond that. There are people who really can't enjoy a personalized mobility experience today. They can't get into a car and just sort of zone out and or take a private phone call because they always have to have someone in the car, and they're very reliant on a friend or loved one or a rideshare network as it is today in order to get around. That population is going to get offered a whole new toolbox enabled through autonomy for them to be able to get around and also have that personalized mobility if they want it. We also have the opportunity, a lot of the congestion in cities is due to the fact that drivers are loitering and waiting to find parking spots or waiting for their passengers. If we have a better dispatching and pickup drop-off mechanism, if we have more intelligent routing and an intelligent network that uses the road surface in a more efficient way, you can really optimize and reduce the number of vehicles on the road at any time so that the vehicles that are on the road are servicing demand and not just trying to find parking or do other things. So this is going to unlock really a better quality of life for everyone, and that's why this foundation is just so important. And the industry is moving is moving at light speed. We've got billions of dollars of investment going into it, and it's all for a better quality of life. It's for making our cities more livable. It's about making transportation more affordable and safer. And it's all happening right here in Pittsburgh.
Thank you. And you covered a lot of ground there, particularly the benefits that will come in the area of safety. I know that's a really core part of Argo's mission, access to mobility, perhaps to individuals with disabilities who might not be able to access mobility in this way. One other area that we see as a tremendous benefit from the sector, and particularly autonomous vehicles, is job creation, obviously, and economic development. And I just want to ask a quick question about job creation. Where do you see the jobs being created, and then specifically, how are those jobs created beyond the high-density urban core areas? You guys have a test track out here in Westmoreland County. And I know, again, that being able to provide opportunity to the entire region is really core to your mission. Talk about jobs a little bit, and where do you see those headed?
Happy to, Matt. So Westmoreland County happens to be the location of our test track. The majority of the people who come to work every day here, they don't need an advanced degree to work at a company like Argo. They need some life skills. They also need some hands-on skills, right? And we find that here, and it's just an incredibly dedicated workforce, extremely hardworking, passionate about our mission, and happy to be able to help in ways that are just essential to bringing this technology to life. So we hire technicians, we hire folks that maybe know how to do certain lab work and are really good with their hands that can also help with the support and maintenance of the vehicles. We do all of our training here. Many of our trainers are actually musicians by background. Turns out that we wrote a blog piece about this, which I just find fascinating, is that musicians have, their brains are wired in a certain way where their reaction times and their ability to communicate is really excellent, and they make great trainers for autonomous vehicle technology. So they actually will train our drivers that test on public roads, and then they'll do their gigs at night, which I just think is awesome. And it makes for a great Christmas party too, I will tell you.
Anyone who's watching the Beatles documentary could attest to that.
Exactly, it's true. And it's not just musicians, but I just find that an interesting fact, right? But we bring and we hire people from all sorts of backgrounds and different different life experiences and skills, and they help us to train our workforce, train our drivers. They help us with various audit and testing type of things that need to be done, maintenance and so on. And right here in Westmoreland County, just given that we have an international footprint, and we are starting to test in Munich and Hamburg. We have a big engineering center in Munich. We actually bring a lot of those people to Westmoreland County to get trained, and then they're starting to now spread that skill set out into Germany. So this is this is a global industry, and this county and the broader Pennsylvania region has a big opportunity to play here.
That's great. We're going to open it up to a little bit of Q&A from the audience. We have 2 mics on each side of the room if anyone is interested in asking a question of Brian at this particular time. So we'll throw it open. Don't be bashful. I know there are questions out there.
You came in person, we thought we'd do Q&A to make it worth your while for making the trip.
Brian, I'm Jim Smith with the Economic Growth Connection. Thank you first for coming and for being out here in the county. We certainly appreciate it. My daughter is one of those individuals that you would be talking about. She has epilepsy, 16 years old, would love to drive but can't. Mm-hmm. I've been talking to her about autonomous vehicles for the last few years. How far away from actual deployment are we when we're going to be able to see these things at dealerships for people to have the ability to buy?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I hear stories like your daughter a lot, and it's absolutely a segment that we need to serve, right? And so, first off, it's a great question around personal car ownership. The cost of the technology today is pretty high, and the whole industry is raising capital in order to bootstrap a very different transportation business from scratch. And so what will happen in the early days is that it will be fleets that own and manage these cars, and they put them into services for people like your daughter to use. So she won't have to necessarily own a vehicle, but she should be able to get that vehicle and take a ride. A lot of the industry is really deploying in some of the warm weather states first, because weather can be a challenge and is something that we're all actively working. We're going to, for Argo, we're operating in Miami and Austin, and those are going to be some of the initial cities that the vehicles will be operational in. As we start to get volume behind the system, as we start to get scale out from city to city, you'll start to see the costs come down, right? Because there's a lot of these components are very volume driven in terms of the economics. Then we should be able to start to look at personal car ownership. I think that's still my personal opinion, and especially with the supply chain in the current state that it's in, I really think that we're still 8 to 10 years away from that inflection point happening. Which is, I know, longer than you probably want to hear, but part of what we have to do is also manage people's expectations about how the technology is going to come to life. So.
Longer than she wants to hear, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Hey, Brian.
Karen.
It's nice to see you. Karen Lightman with Carnegie Mellon's Metro 21. So besides the state legislative action that you'd like to see, what are some other things? Like, I'm thinking, do you need different kinds of test tracks? Do you want to see more connectivity? Would you like to see things like we're working on the Smart Belt Coalition with this idea that you can drive across states, so you're not just on one, so what are the kinds of things to get to that future state so his daughter can be an autonomous vehicle? What are some things that you'd like to see from this region and you feel like this region is well poised for? Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, and thank you also for the incredible work that you're doing at CMU, and Traffic 21 is just so much innovation coming out of that center. So one thing in particular, I mentioned congestion earlier. Congestion isn't going to get solved by putting more autonomous vehicles on the road, right? It is only going to get solved if we start to think about how we can network these vehicles and in some ways manage their movements for the greater good, right? And I think that there are big questions, policy-wise as well as technologically, as to who owns that network, how does it work, can we get more than just one industry player on that network, because it shouldn't be for the benefit of just one company, right? If we're going to really optimize for the greater community, and I think those are things that we need to be working on, because at the end of the day, we can't all put billions into an industry all of us create our own rideshare capability and just throw more vehicles onto the network. That is not the answer, right? So I think there's quite a bit to solve there that, frankly, between CMU and really the willingness of Pittsburgh and the surrounding region to accept that we are sort of an R&D capital and that we're willing to try out these new concepts and maybe deploy the first network that actually allows you to do that sort of management, right? I think we're willing to sort of take that leap of faith and say, yeah, let's give it a shot. That's unique about our region, and we should double down on that, and that's what's going to keep us in sort of a leadership position. And of course, test tracks and sort of test facilities are always something that I think the industry could use.
Good morning, Robin Zoflik with Piper O'Brien Architects. My question is on getting people to Pittsburgh. What are you doing to recruit in various regions and also publicize the leadership that we have in Autonomous? And what should the conference be doing in the community to enhance that influx of talent?
Yeah, great. It's an awesome question. So, we always talk about how livable Pittsburgh is, and I don't want us to get complacent. It's a great place to live, but we still have a lot of things we need to do, right? So we still need to be managing crime rates, making sure that we have a vibrant downtown. I think that is essential, even for the surrounding region's success. And I know that there's a lot that Matt's doing and in partnership with the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership to address those things. We need to, in terms of a talent attraction perspective, I was just telling someone earlier before the panel that, before COVID, we were very successful in getting people to relocate to Pittsburgh. We had finally sort of cracked the code. So we established our headquarters here. We said this is where the critical mass is going to be. People would invariably come in from our other locations from across the US and even the globe, and they would realize, wait a second, the weather's not as bad as I thought. People are super nice. It's actually really, I can get a 3-car garage and sort of do, I can establish family roots and have a good, all the universities, a great education for my kids. And they started to come here. Now with the pandemic and where remote work is becoming even more of a thing, we've seen that slow down a bit, right? And so that means that we just have to go even further to show people what a great place is. And so that means focusing more on early childhood education, on Pittsburgh schools system, and making sure we have one of the best public school systems that's available for everybody, not just the few, right? We need to make sure that we're offering people a great place to have a family and to grow and prosper. And it's not just about jobs, it's about also providing world-class facilities for people. And we need to do that everywhere, right? It is just absolutely essential. And one of the things that Matt and I, and thanks to some outspoken members on the chamber board, they've leaned in and they said, look, we want you guys to take up certain topics related to the education system. Let's work it. Let's figure out how we can lean in. Let's connect business for the first time, which is not happening right now. Let's connect that with what's with the school system and see how the private sector can help. These are things we got to lean into, and I think if we do that, we will continue to sort of hone our edge that we have and bring people in.
I think we might have time for one more question. Tim.
Good morning, Brian. Thank you for taking the time. Matt, appreciate you being here. The question I have is regarding state government and their role. We have this amazing opportunity, which you have outlined very well. You've got this powerful research engine that we have. We've got the private sector. We have foundations that are all moving in lockstep with the opportunity. So what is this? You had mentioned some legislation. What is state government doing to be the sort of fourth real strong leg of the opportunity? I'm hopeful that they're on board, and I'm sure they are, but what can you tell us about state government and the legislation?
Sure, so I'm going to have Matt also chime in a little bit. I'd like to get your perspective on it, but just the current landscape in Pennsylvania specifically is that there is a set of rules in order to obtain a test permit to test autonomous vehicles with safety drivers in the vehicle, okay? The next step for the state is to create a permitting process that allows us to deploy fully driverless vehicles and realize all the benefits that we've talked about. That has been sort of a work in progress for a little while now. Senator Stefano and a number of others have stepped up and made known the benefits and has really, I think, done a good job in educating Harrisburg on what has to happen, and we're hopeful that this will get put into place very, very soon. Maybe you could say a little bit about the mechanics of it.
Yeah, the legislation we think is going to be rolled out. It has been rolled out among the legislators, rolled out officially publicly early next year. As Brian said, Senator Stefano is one of the leaders. Senator Wayne Langerholk from Cambria County, who's the chair of the Transportation Committee in the Senate, is the prime sponsor there. Senator Stefano is one of the co-sponsors. So that piece of legislation on the regulatory side is absolutely mission critical for Pittsburgh, as Brian articulated, to become the autonomy capital of the world. There's also a role for the state in a broader set of public policy priorities that they really need to push, and that and I want to steal the thunder of the next panel because this is something I know Don's going to talk about, but other states are doing this. Ohio, Michigan, Massachusetts are making not only policy decisions, and so creating that regulatory environment that Brian talked about, they're putting real dollars behind it. So one of the priorities coming out of the study is to create a state-level autonomy program, match it up with the regulatory changes, and then match it up with really robust investment from the state for this region. Because one of the things that we've talked about frequently with the study is that other regions have their big asks, and the entire region is aligned around that particular ask. This doesn't necessarily have to be our only ask, but certainly the autonomous mobile systems sector needs to be one of the big asks that when we go to Harrisburg, we're all talking about this particular sector from the policy side, from the dollars and investment side, as well as when we go to Washington. We need to be aligned with all of our partners around this issue. And one of the huge partners that we actually have engaged over the last couple of weeks that we think is really critical is labor. Labor can really benefit from this. The building trades, steel workers, we think there's a big role for them to partner with us and move this forward at the state level and then at the DC level as well. So I think we're getting the hook here. So I will. It's like the old Gong show, remember?
I saw the gong back there, yeah.
You saw the gong. So we thank you to Brian for everything you've done, not only with us here today, but for the Chamber. Being a tremendous board chair for us and providing us with critical support is really appreciated. We're going to turn it over to our panel now that's going to be led by Gabby Gonzalez. As I said, RK Mellon was the funder for this study. So Gabby from RK Mellon is going to lead the panel discussion. So with that, we will welcome Gabby and the panel members up to the stage. Thank you. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to our. There we go. Thank you very much. Snafu number one of being in person as opposed to in Zoom. Thank you very much everyone for joining us, and thank you again to the Allegheny Conference for hosting this, and also to RADC for allowing us to utilize this space. And of course, Brian and Matt, thank you for a very informative fireside chat. I felt like we don't necessarily have to have our panel discussion anymore because you covered the basics.
Right.
So as Matt mentioned, I'm Gabriela Gonzalez. I'm with the Richard King Mellon Foundation. I wanted to introduce Don Smith from RIDC. We have Majestic Lane, who is the Allegheny Conference's Chief Equity Officer. and Tom Salapo. Want to make sure I did not mispronounce that name. He is the Director of R&D for Butler County-based MSA Safety Company, which is a regional manufacturer that has adopted a lot of autonomous technologies. And then, of course, Senator Pat Stefano, who represents District 32 for Fayette, Westmoreland, and Somerset. And I wanted to note how extremely active this senator is. He is on the chair of the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee, vice chair of the Communications and Technology Committee, and is on the Aging and Youth, Appropriations, Consumer Protection, I need to breathe, professional licensor, and state government and transportation committees. And I did need to read all that because I'm very impressed. So thank you, Senator, for all that you do.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So Don, I wanted to start with you. RIDC and the Chamber essentially hosted this study. The foundation did fund it, but I wanted to ask you about the genesis of the study. What was the impetus for this, and why was this particular study necessary?
Well, thanks, Gabby, and everybody welcome to RIDC Westmoreland. We're happy to have you here today. I think the genesis for this was really pretty simple. You look around what's going on and what's growing in our region, and autonomous vehicles and robotics are so many of the exciting companies that are creating big numbers of jobs. We've known for a long time that Carnegie Mellon was the exceptional university in the world in robotics and autonomy, but we're really seeing the commercial development and seeing the job creation start to happen, and really said, okay, this seems like it's a good opportunity. We need to characterize it. We need to understand what's going on, what's driving it, what the future opportunities are, and then really mobilize. A lot of this stuff has happened, I wouldn't say sort of on its own, because if you look at the investments in the Robotics Institute and the National Robotics Engineering Consortium, and even the Digital Greenhouse Tech Collaborative Robotics Foundry laid some of the foundation for this. But it just seemed like we have this amazing momentum and a huge opportunity. I mean, Brian said it, $1 trillion opportunity. We really need to get focused to make sure that we capture this opportunity. And that was really behind the study.
Great. So you mentioned our momentum and capturing this opportunity, but what is giving competing regions an edge over us? What are our strengths versus our weaknesses, and what can and should we do to actually compete with those other regions?
Well, I think our strength is, I mean, we're probably the third largest region in terms of the number of employees in autonomous and robotics companies. And so we've seen commercial success happen here. There's no question, with CMU being the number one, we have the ace of Trump in this game. And so that's really what allowed us to get into this. But you're seeing Ohio very aggressive on both the business climate and their investments in the third frontier, in Jobs Ohio, in Drive Ohio, Michigan creating the M-City facility and initiative to really try and steal some of this advantage that we have. And so the time is right for us to really put our best foot forward and make sure that we wrap this up and continue to be the home not only of the R&D, but also the deployment and the production and testing and the big job creation that goes with that.
Great, yeah. So thanks, Don. I'm going to actually turn to you, Senator, about thinking about the role of R&D and how we can really propel the region to become more focused on commercialization and industrial and manufacturing. Can you provide some insights as a state senator and a member of the Senate how this could happen? We know that you are sponsoring some important legislation. So can you speak a little bit more about that legislation and kind of the role that you see in propelling us as a region?
Sure thing. Yeah. I'm going to go back just a touch and look at state government and how things are working. A lot of great things are happening here in this region, especially in Pittsburgh with their education. But if you look at government and what government does, I always say government has two speeds, slow and slower. And you have great advancements occurring in this region. Excellent opportunities, excellent industrial plans, growth. Government's a little slow to catch up because there are barriers in place because of older technologies, older industries. And I think Brian said it the best. A lot of our vehicles and our rules and regulations were designed for the occupant and occupant safety. That those very protections are now hindrances for our growth. And that's what we need to look at, and that's the purpose of this legislation, is to take a look at where those barriers are and remove them. And I know the Department of Transportation has done a wonderful job here in the state doing the regulation changes they can do. Now we've hit the wall, and we've got to make statutory changes. And those are the things we're talking about, and that's what's in this bill is going to be introduced. And the great part of it is we're working with our industry partners to make sure we are in proper alignment, and then building the coalitions we need within the legislature to get those votes that we need to get across the finish line.
Great.
And I'll just touch on one last thing. There's 3 important numbers to get this finished: 26, 102, and 1. What are those? 26 votes in the Senate to pass, 102 votes in the House, and the governor's signature. Those are the 3 numbers we're going to be focused on as we move this project forward.
Thank you, Senator. And how likely do you feel that this piece of legislation could pass? And what are some of the potential wrinkles and consternations out there?
The hardest obstacle I see in front of us is education of the other members. As you read my list of committees that I'm involved in, I always consider myself the jack of all trades, master of none, and I'm always being diverted in my focus. That happens to all the other legislators across the entire Commonwealth. So we need to take some time and focus their energies on this particular industry and these changes, and that's exactly what we're going to be working on from the committee standpoint, from the caucus standpoint, and then doing the same thing in the House. Everyone that is elected always wants to have our industries growing, and I'm sure this will be an easy sell.
Well, we all have our fingers crossed for sure.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Senator. So I want to turn now over to you, Majestic, and thinking about a number of the other regions, the ones that Don had listed. Ohio comes to mind, is sort of our neighbor region, and how that state might be potentially out-competing us. But when we think about some of these other regions that have really propelled tech industries, just more broadly conceived, such as Boston or Seattle, Austin, and San Francisco come to mind. These are just these less nascent regions that are around tech, but they're tech focused. And we often, though, hear about those regions and their economic disparities that either linger or worsen. And so given your role at the Allegheny Conference and thinking about equity and inclusivity around our economy, how do we as a region avoid exacerbating any disparities and really ensuring that anyone who lives in the region can pursue opportunities around the robotics and autonomous industry? What are some ideas that you have?
Thank you. I think one of the keys is to look at what has happened in other places and not repeat those things. It's starting with equity at the center of it and in the opportunity, and understanding that there's a moral imperative to these conversations, but it's really an economic imperative to make sure that everyone in the region can be a part of the success of it. And that's from a racial, gender equity perspective, but also geographic, right? Like we know and understand that we have a lot of areas outside of the urban core that also have not seen as much investment, so that really engaging those areas and thinking about workforce development, thinking about other industries that are around the autonomous industry, so that we're not just focused on a small number of jobs. And I think that's been more of a conversation in the past around tech and saying, well, there's a small number of jobs and everyone can't have them, but there's huge industries. And how are we aligning people, and how are we using state government, how are we using philanthropic resources, how are we using business resources to really think about on-ramps and pathways for everyone to be a part at all different places. So I think one of the differences is us thinking about that and being purposeful and intentional from the very beginning. And also I want to include supply chains. And really thinking about business diversity and supply chains from the beginning, and not just doing what we've been used to doing, but now being okay with doing something different. And that's where we're all sitting at a table. We can start to have those conversations differently, so that Pittsburgh doesn't have to suffer from some of the same issues as some of the other regions, that as the industry expands, people are pushed out because there's lack of opportunities. And there's also the things that government and philanthropic folks can do and business can do to support keeping people in and around those areas, so that they can participate in increasing transportation and all those kind of things. So it's really like a system of thinking. And I think that we're at a place now where we're recognizing that that has to be built into what we're doing in order to really make this the region that this could happen for everyone.
That's right. Thanks, Majestic. And just to follow on, do you have any examples of directions you think the region currently is moving positively, or that that we're doing right, per se, and then potentially negatively? Anything that we need to really kind of tweak in order to propel the region that way?
Yeah, well, I think the example of the process for the Build Back Better grant in the EDA application, where we actually centered equity as part of the application. I think in the past, we haven't done that as a region. We haven't said, hey, we have to start thinking about this from the very beginning, not something that we have to think about to check a box, right? So the fact that we're starting not checking a box, I think is a really good step that we're making, and bringing people in to the process who traditionally aren't in the rooms when we're talking about those kind of applications, when we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars coming into a region. There's some folks that are never having the dialogue, but this time, and we'll continue to make sure that folks that haven't been in the conversations, again, from a racial perspective, gender perspective, but also from a geographic perspective, are actually in the table to talk about the assets they have that are present that we can build on.
Okay, great, thank you. So Tom, I'm very curious from your perspective, being embedded in the autonomous industry in the private sector. Well, first, can you just give us a little insight about how your company utilizes autonomous technologies and what you've learned to date about the business involvement with it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly it's newer for us, right? We're a 107-year-old company based in Pittsburgh, global safety products company, and we're known for our safety products. You know, put a product in a box, ship it out the door, customer uses it. But in the last 10 years, we've really transformed into a safety solutions company. So we've built sort of that digital foundation on which we could put a cloud solution platform, connected products, and all the enhancements to protecting workers that comes with that. And now recently begin to introduce autonomous solutions into that ecosystem. So it's at the beginning for us, but you can't think about worker safety in the future without either thinking about how an autonomous system can enhance that, or even on the more extreme case, you know, can an autonomous system replace a worker going into a hazardous environment? So for us, both of those are on our radar and certainly part of our long-term roadmap.
Yeah, great, thanks. And you had mentioned worker safety, and there is definitely this tension between autonomy in a workplace versus whether that requires job loss versus job transition. So can you talk a little bit about kind of autonomy, if that's a word, in the workplace, and how you all are thinking from the business perspective about talent and talent pipeline, and how do you get the sufficient type of talent that you know you will need to, say, utilize the autonomous systems?
Yeah, I mean, the first part of the question, there is generally concern about replacing workers, but I think it's clear that if you do have more effective ways to do things, that you need people to run that. So I think our customers generally understand that. The second part of your question really is you're talking about talent. That is a concern for us. The type of talent that we need to go up to Cranberry to work on these products is the same talent that Brian needs here in the Pittsburgh area and all the other companies need in the Pittsburgh area. And it feels like lately it's a lot harder to get that talent. So I think there's a question of, is that talent pipeline big enough, and is it growing? And I think that's something we'll probably discuss here, because I think that's one of the things we need to think about for future sustainability of this industry.
Yeah, no, I definitely would love to touch on that. And I have a question for you, Tom, and I also wanted to open this up to each of the panelists. And thinking about the talent, the workforce systems, and of course the autonomous commercialization, you know, thinking about this whole ecosystem, supply chain you brought up, Majestic, how far along, from your perspective, are we in building the autonomous systems kind of ecosystem that we really need in the region? And what does the region really need to do to propel us to get to a very sustainable, workable ecosystem? And I'm using this broad term ecosystem because I'm very curious from perspective from RIDC, from Allegheny Conference, from you in the private sector, and then of course with the state perspective and policy, kind of what we need to do to get there.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it seems that the R&D portion of that ecosystem has developed rather quickly, and it's rather impressive, right? Yeah. There's a lot there, and it's high quality And I think there's a high quality pipeline of talent coming into that. Longer term, as I said, I think questioning is that pipeline big enough, and what are we doing to increase the amount of talent that we're bringing to this region, either within the Pittsburgh area by increasing the amount of education programs and graduating engineers that can go into this, and then also bringing people in from other regions. I think that's a challenge. And Brian talked about do we have the ability to do that, or did we lose a little bit of the ability to do that during the pandemic? So there's a marketing opportunity there as well. And when I think about supply chain, that feels a little bit more nebulous to me, and I think there's an opportunity for collaboration amongst all the autonomous system companies to create reasons for investors to come in and put in contract manufacturing, and that could be standardization, building scale, safety standards helps do that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of elements to that, right?
Yeah, great. Who else would like to tackle the ecosystem question? Don?
I'll jump in, and I know we only have 10 minutes left, so I can't cover the whole ecosystem.
Thank you for letting me know.
But
Someone's paying attention.
I think one of the asset bases we have as the ecosystem is Argo and Aurora, really cool, sexy, autonomous vehicle, but we have tons of robotics companies in all kinds of industries across our region. So it's not just the AV, it's also warehouse and logistics, it's construction, it's defense, and logistics. It's really a broad sector of industry, so there's a lot of opportunities. But I think from an ecosystem standpoint, we have all these assets, we have the community colleges, we have Innovation Works, we have the conference and the PRA. What we really need is we need the focus and the connection so that we really make a concerted effort to make sure that all those dots are connected and focused on the opportunity that's here. Some of that is infrastructure, physical, like test tracks and sensors and networks. Some of it's space. The AV companies, the robotics companies need different space than office companies. And we need to make sure that we have that. But then when we get to the supply chain and the deployment, servicing, testing, where your big job creation opportunities are going to come, we need job sites. And those are going to be in places like Westmoreland and Butler and Beaver and Lawrence and Armstrong, where we have those big sites, but we need to develop them and make sure they're ready to go, and that we have the right kinds of space and the right kinds of focus, and that most importantly, the industry has to grow. All of the goals we have for the region, if we don't grow the industry, we can't drive the rest of the goals. So we need to make sure we're talking to the industry, making sure we're understanding what their needs are, what the opportunities are, and really leveraging the groundbreaking work they've done to create a much bigger, broader economic impact.
Great, thank you. Yes, Senator.
And I'll jump in.
Yes.
I mean, these partnerships are excellent in putting all these pieces together. But I think, in my opinion, and this has always been my belief, Pennsylvania is not the most business-friendly state. So our regulatory the regulatory setup has to change. It's too difficult to start, or it's a barrier. So we need to make sure that our regulatory environment is conducive to these types of investments, that our guardrails are set up in place to give people the room they need to expand. And our tax structure is set up in the way to promote the investments that need to come, and that the tax structure is beneficial for those who want to move into Pennsylvania to be employed. Those pieces need to be in place. We're working on that, we're getting closer, but Pennsylvania has those barriers and we want to lower those. That will complete the entire picture. And it's really good for our region. Our region has been an industrial hot point since the dawn of our country, and I know that's why everything's working so well here, because we've done this before and we can do that again and just get these barriers out of the way. It's one of my roles, and a lot of my colleagues, where a lot of my colleagues I work with are from the business industries and understand these issues. And we have great alliances with our chambers that bring that industry and technology into those who are working on legislation.
Great, thank you. Majestic.
Two things. I think one, it's important to create the quality of life for the region that people want to be here, right? And places where people don't feel like everyone's flourishing and places where people don't feel like there's an opportunity for everyone to succeed, you see people leaving those places, right? And so they're going to places where they feel like there's just a broader way that people can be successful. So I think as we all work towards that, Brian talked about some of those things of quality of life, reducing crime, education, and all these things are really important for the broader sense of how do people want to locate themselves in the region. And then two, I think the ecosystem of looking at where can everybody find an on-ramp, right? We know that there's a certain level of education that you need for certain jobs, but there's other levels of education you need for other jobs. And our ability to be open about that and to start relatively young in thinking about these industries. We can't think about the industry when someone graduates high school and then try to upskill and figure it out. We have to start thinking about from the very beginning what's happening, the opportunities in the industries, and expose young people of all backgrounds to the possibility of industries early and often. And by the industries being here, by state support, by business support, we can let people know that these things are options. So I think that's important for the ecosystem.
Great, great, thank you. I want to open up to any of the panelists, if you would like to have any final words, especially thinking about what could really help the region be an economic driver, or the autonomous industry to be an economic driver for the region. Don, what do we really need to do?
Well, I think that the one thought I'd like to leave people with is the time is now. We have to move fast, and we have to move boldly. We have a great base, we have these assets, but we need to mobilize. We have American Relief Act money at the state that could be deployed to help do this. We have infrastructure funding that's coming to the region. We need to maximize it, and we need to align it with what's going to help grow this industry. And then we need to really get our story together as a region and tell it so that the world knows this is the headquarters of robotics and autonomy, and you should want to be here and be a part of it because it's going to be the next big thing. If we don't capture it, someone else will. We need to move quickly.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Majestic. Sorry, I'm just going right down the line.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just think the thing I would leave is how do we make sure that we're all working in alignment together, and that we don't silo ourselves off in thinking about industries, and that we don't leave talent on the sideline, that we actually maximize for what's happening in the entire region. And that means, again, maybe thinking a little differently, doing things a little differently, but that's what'll make us competitive nationally and globally, is that we're not doing the same things as regions who are now combating their challenges on cost of living, combating their challenges on gentrification, combating their challenges on lack of opportunity and economic mobility. That we actually have the ability to do that now. And that as long as we center that, I think that will be a competitive opportunity.
Great, thank you. And Tom?
Yeah, as a manufacturing company who's looking for talent, I want to answer, let's talk about the talent pipeline, but I think the biggest opportunity here is the collaboration and the alignment, such that the whole can exceed the sum of the parts. And I think that's what the opportunity is here, because I think if everyone gets aligned and there's collaboration, there'll be much more opportunities for growth, for defining and establishing how the supply chain works, and bringing more interested parties into that mix. So I think that should be the top priority.
Great, thank you. Yes, Senator.
I think the lines of communication are the key. Keeping all the pieces communicating together, because as you had mentioned, silos. The government loves to work in their silos and not communicate with each other. And that is going to be the key to break down those barriers so we are cross-communicating and everybody knows what direction we're going to go and how we're all going to go together. And as I always say, we can do so much more if we pull on the rope together than if we're pulling on either end of it. And that's going to be the key. And I know Pennsylvania can do that. The beauty of Pennsylvania is we have all the weather all the time and all the terrain. We need everybody here because we've got it all. We've got everything you possibly would need, urban, rural, and suburban. It's all here. So Pennsylvania's the greatest place. Bring them in.
Great. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists. Great. And I did want to leave ample time for Q&A, so I'll hand the proverbial mic back over to the Allegheny Conference. Any questions?
You did a good job.
Regulation and barriers. We hear about that every day. We heard that from with Walnut Capital yesterday at a meeting. And what can industry and regular people do to motivate quicker change? Like Don says, the time is now. We need to move quick. So any suggestions on grassroots movements, because there are a lot of people in the region that aren't in the room that are aware of these opportunities. And how do we get that message out here and also abroad?
You want to take that one, I assume?
Sure.
The best way, and it's what I've been doing already, is meeting with these companies and developing those lines of communication. Every bill that comes up for a vote, I know for myself and a lot of my colleagues, we're looking to see what communications we've had. Are we matching up our yes or no vote to the people who have told us what they feel? Our job, we're representative democracy, so we're supposed to represent those constituents and their views. So I'm always looking to see what their opinions were, how many for, how many against, am I in alignment with that? That is the critical part. So the more people that are speaking up about what they see as barriers, what they want to see done, we combine all that together. That is critical. That has to happen everywhere. I know we always have a tendency, well, they know what they're doing. No. Please send your messages. That is the key, so that we represent you accurately. And then the message gets across. We all have a role to play. And that's actually what got me here, because I was starting to advocate. And then when I was asked, I said, well, I'm tired of asking. I'm going to do it myself. So that's what we need to do, be advocates all of ourselves.
Thank you. Great. I think there was another question.
To anybody on the panel. I think one of the important parts is going to be increasing the educational opportunities for all.
I'm sorry,
and that
Jim,
means,
can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jim Smith, Economic Growth Connection. So one of the keys is going to be increasing the educational opportunities for all. And that means utilizing our institutions of higher learning, our community colleges, outside of the research institutes, right? And developing programs that can help support a growing industry. Has there been any discussions so far on how we could do that? What type of training might be needed? And where are the locations, if that has occurred, that this is happening?
So I can start on this, and feel free to jump in, colleagues. But I think there are definitely some fledgling efforts, and this is a really important topic. I know that Carnegie Mellon is actually working with Community College of Allegheny County to port some curriculum so the community colleges can offer not a CMU autonomy degree, but the training that would allow folks to participate in the jobs that get created as a result of that. There's no reason that can't be replicated throughout the region at all the community colleges, and we really increase that technical talent pipeline. I think the other thing is you look at some of the experiences with maker spaces that can go in high schools and intermediate units and community organizations. And this is a great way to expose kids. You know, we used to take shop and we used to have to build things. And so if we can have more kids who have that kind of orientation and that exposure combined with understanding what the opportunities are, not only in the AV companies, but in the manufacturing side that'll go through this supply chain, it really is a region-wide opportunity and one we need to attack at every level.
Yeah, I would also like to put a plug in for pre-apprenticeships and all those sort of work-based learning opportunities. I think the region needs more of those. My plug. Anybody else want to go ahead, Senator?
I can jump in real quick
Yeah,
on a similar aspect, but a little bit before that is I do sit on the Early Education Caucus, and we're talking about the opportunities, because you can bring in a lot of the new education opportunities, not education, but employment opportunities, but we also need proper child care to support those people coming in. And that is critical, and that's one of our shortages that we're having across the state right now. So that is another key component as we're looking to expand the workforce and the industries that are there.
Great. Oh, looks like our time is up, which means we have time for one more question. No, but sincerely, they're going to give me the hook. But thank you very much, panelists, and I just want to thank everybody for their time today. And I believe we am now introducing Jen. Thank you.
Yes, no, good morning. I'm Jen Beer, Vice President of Government Affairs with the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of the board and the staff here at the conference, I'd like to thank all of our panelists and all of our speakers today. Really appreciate all of your insights. Very, very valuable and I think educational discussion this morning, so thank you. Also like to thank all of our sponsors and our regional investors for being here today: Giant Eagle, PNC, Gateway Health, Highmark, Peoples, an essential utilities company, PPG, and UPMC Health Plan. And additionally, a very special thank you to Senator Stefano, Jason Rigoni, who I believe is still here, and all of our friends at Team RIDC Westmoreland. Really appreciate the warm welcome here to Westmoreland County. It's great to have your partnership. I think one thing is very clear from the discussion that we heard everywhere today, that collaboration is very critical in moving this forward and understanding this opportunity. So I think that's something we do very, very well in this region, and so I really encourage us to think about that as we move forward. And also, everybody, I think, has teed up what I was going to use as my call to action this morning. We've heard about this state legislation, so I really encourage all of you to please stay connected to us here at the conference as the legislation rolls out early next year. We hope that you will please, as the senator said, educate your elected officials, particularly at the state level here, as we hope to see this investment. This is what's going to keep jobs and opportunity here for our region. So please stay in touch with us on that. In the meantime, I wish you all a very happy and safe holiday and look forward to working with you all in the new year. And as we conclude, we ask that you please stay to watch one final video. It features another leader in the ecosystem, Aurora, which recently made its public debut and also announced its sole headquarters here in the Pittsburgh region. So thank you.
My name's Gerardo Interiano, and I'm the Vice President of Government Relations and Public Affairs at Aurora. Aurora's mission is to deliver the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. Our roots are here. Our three founders, two of them came from Carnegie Mellon University, and we're proud to call Pittsburgh home. As our mission says, we want to do this work safely, quickly, and broadly. Safely, because we want to save people's lives. Quickly, because anything worth doing is worth doing quickly. And broadly, because we want to have an impact on the entire transportation ecosystem. From the movement of goods to the movement of people, we believe that the Aurora Driver will power the transportation ecosystem of tomorrow. Talent pipeline that is here is second to none. We love hiring people here in Pittsburgh. We also love telling people all the great things that are happening here in Pittsburgh, from the cost of living to the parks to the trails, and recruiting them to come to this great city and do the work that they can do best right here in this community.